Ми готові розпочинати.
I'm Tetyana Mazur. I'm the director of Ukrainian office of Amnesty International. And from the beginning of Euromaidan, our organization was reacting to different violations of human rights. We were monitoring the violations, documenting these cases, both in Kiev and later in Crimea and in the east of Ukraine. Very often, especially in the last 2-3 months, we were getting questions, first of all, from mass media on the situation in the east of the country. It was quite difficult to answer these questions because there was a certain information vacuum. For a long time, we wanted to go to Donetsk Oblast, to Lugansk Oblast, but it was not easy to do that from the point of view of security. But in June, we finally, together with the surveying mission, visited Mariupol. We managed to have talks with those who became victims to human rights violations, with their lawyers, representatives, with representatives of civil society organizations, local authorities, central local authorities. And the results of that, and we are ready to present you the result of this survey. That's our survey, which is called Kidnapping and Torturing in the Eastern Ukraine. The text is in the files that we distributed. We would like to draw your attention to the histories of two people who became heroes of these surveys, and we have certain videos, we will show them, and also some other videos. I also would like to introduce my colleagues, Bohdan Ovcharuk, who is the spokesperson of our organization, Amnesty International in Ukraine. He's one of the persons who went to the east of the country, and Maria Tomak, with who we cooperated in the past. She's from the Center of Civil Freedoms, and she's one of those who initiated the Euromaidan SOS, quite a famous association that was helping first activists of Euromaidan in Kiev, and now all the attention is directed to Crimea and the east of Ukraine. Starting from the protests in November of 2013, our organization documented many different human rights violations. But today we state that kidnappings, tortures are the main human rights violations, the number of which is growing very rapidly. We fixed the cases of kidnapping during Euromaidan. That is the famous case of kidnapping Igor Lutsenko, activist and journalist, who together with Yuri Verbitsky, some unknown people, kidnapped from the hospital where they came for medical assistance. Next day, Igor was found with very big damages. He survived, but he complained about the cruel treatment, and Yuri Verbitsky was found, but he died by that time. Again, we fixed such cases in Crimea as well. But definitely, most cases of kidnapping, of human rights violations are fixed in the east of Ukraine. And I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Bohdan Ovcharuk, the spokesperson for Amnesty International in Ukraine, the person who went to the east to learn the truth about human rights violations. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, colleagues, for coming. This report, Amnesty International, has all the facts which witness about different tortures which in the last 3 months were applied to the activists, journalists, and participants of the protests in the east of Ukraine. Most of such kidnappings are made by armed separatists, and the victims very often are beaten, and the tortures are applied to them. There are other cases which show the facts of violation of human rights in other parts of Ukraine. We visited the eastern part of Ukraine, and we fixed the cases of tortures. We also talked to the victims of tortures and kidnapping who had to leave their homes and found refuge in Kiev, even though we don't have the exact information about all kidnappings, but the Ministry of the Interior informed that from April till June 2014, about 500 statements about kidnapping were fixed. The monitoring mission of UN on human rights fixed 222 cases in the last 3 months, and this figure is growing. Besides, Amnesty International met with different initiative groups which are gathering data about kidnappings. The research group gave the list to our group of more than 100 persons who were kept in detention. In most cases, those people were talking about tortures. Most of the kidnappings were happening in Donetsk and Lugansk regions. The people who were kidnapped were not just military and militiamen, but also journalists, politicians, activists, international observers, and entrepreneurs. Besides, the situation looks such that in some regions of eastern Ukraine, there are some cases of there is the international military conflict. So in conditions of the conflict, the international humanitarian law should be applied, which should be applied to both non-governmental armed groupings and state representatives. The Geneva Convention that regulates non-international conflicts prohibits kidnapping of hostages and civil persons. Also, according to Article 5 of European Convention on Human Rights and Freedoms, no one could be deprived of the right of freedom. During the conflict in the east of Ukraine, Amnesty International documented the kidnapping of civilians by separatists and also of the servicemen who are loyal to Kiev. Anna, who's the activist, informed Amnesty International that on the 20th of May she was kidnapped by armed people. She was detained for 6 days and then she was freed in exchange of other prisoners. Anna showed the scars on the neck, legs, and hands. Anna also told us that those who were interrogating, they forced her to write the separatist slogan with her own blood on a wall. Most of the kidnappings have political grounds, but there are some evidence that military armed groups start torturing to scare and to take under control the peaceful population. In some cases, the separatists wanted to use those detained people as the life shield. Also, they kidnapped them to use for mandatory works and for the exchange for money. Sasha left after in Lugansk he was kidnapped by separatists. For a day he was beaten many times. Eventually, he was freed after his father paid for him ransom, and that was $60,000. At the time when most of such tortures are exercised by separatist groups, but it is informed that the groups of self-defense are also involved in cruel treatment. Our group went from Kiev to Mariupol, which in the last 2 months was sort of changing hands. This official in the municipal authorities of Mariupol who wanted to be anonymous informed that when the separatist was taken prison by this military officials, he was crying from pain. And
in a video interview, he told that he was questioned, beaten, and tortured, and they broke his hands, and they forced him to say Ukrainian slogans in the regions where there are a lot of military groups, police, and who are loyal to those who are in power. Police is absent, and even in Mariupol, the level of security of local people is very low. When on the 25th and on the 26th, our delegation in June visited Mariupol, it was clear that local people don't feel security. There were we didn't see any police men on the streets, and many people doubted that they reported to Kiev. So there was a vacuum of power and security. The people were afraid of repressions, kidnapping, and tortures. Under such conditions, local people cannot count on protection from kidnapping from terrorists and self-defense and violation of human rights by separatists and in other regions is even worse than in Mariupol that we were able to visit. Escalation of kidnapping and tortures deserves to be condemned. All the parties in this conflict should stop unconditionally. Should liberate all arrested people, and they should be protected from bad treatment and tortures. Now we'll have video.
Я перепрошую, у нас невелика.
We have some technical problem. So I would like to remind you that we have this video, and also we have not edited video which you can use in your. It's absolutely free. Come up to our office or contact our office, and we'll give you a reference.
Protests in the central square of Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands took to the streets in peaceful demonstrations which turned violent. Protesters pitted against the police and the state. A popular uprising in the capital that ousted the pro-Russian president. 6 months on, and the central square is calm. Armoured vehicles now a plaything for children. But the barricades remain, a reminder of recent history. Memorials for those that lost their lives fighting to oust the regime. But this is now a country split in two. Separatists have taken control of key cities in the east, and many have fled. We met with our colleagues in Kiev, following up on allegations of abduction and torture. We've been provided with a list of more than 100 individuals, journalists, activists, protesters, held captive, beaten and tortured by armed groups in the east. Hannah, a pro-Ukrainian activist, fled to Kiev in early June. She's now receiving help at this local hospital. Here, volunteers distribute medical supplies donated to help the ever-increasing number of injured fleeing from the east. She was lifted from her flat in Donetsk by masked gunmen and taken for interrogation.
My face was smashed. He punched me in the face with his fist. He was trying to beat me everywhere. I was covering myself with my hands. He cut my hands and arms with a knife. It was just the beginning. I thought I might be killed. When someone points a gun at you and says, "I'm going to kill you," and there's nothing you can do, you think it's going to happen.
Hannah describes how the blade sliced off the skin of her finger, peeling it like an orange, and then she was forced to write a separatist slogan on the wall in her own blood.
The man who was brutalizing me and us, he said, "Write with your blood on the wall, I love Donbass. And if you can't do this, if you run out of blood, I will shoot you." So I had this open wound with skin flapping off. I took the blood from the wound and wrote with my left hand on the wall.
Hannah was freed after 6 days in a hostage exchange. There is an ever-increasing number arriving from the east to Kiev. They are living with friends, family, sharing apartments, bedding down wherever they can. We met Sasha on the outskirts of the city. He arrived here just 10 days ago. He was involved in protests in Luhansk. He told us how he was accosted at gunpoint on June the 12th, taken to the Central Intelligence Building, where he was tortured repeatedly for 24 hours, beaten all over his body until he was unconscious, electrocuted, burnt with a cigarette.
After half hour, sort of 40 minutes, you don't feel the pain. So they started to beat me by electricity. They even took a cigarette, they were stabbing a cigarette by my leg, and then stabbed another cigarette in that hole in my leg.
After the interrogation, he was kept in a basement.
I was laying in the basement, the door opened, and one guy with a gun put the gun to my head and said to go straight the corridor and don't say anything. While I was walking through the corridor, armed people who were there, they told me goodbye, they are going to kill you, so.
Sasha was not shot. He was freed after his father paid a $60,000 ransom. He was bundled onto a train bound for Kiev, still wearing his blood-stained clothes. Sasha and Hannah are now safe in Kiev, but theirs is only one side of the story. There are allegations of abuses on both sides of the divide. For now, they are trying to rebuild their lives for a future which, like Ukraine's, is far from certain.
Thank you very much. And a small explanation, that video was done in English by our colleagues in our main office in London, because the presentation of the research is taking place not only today, but it's a presentation also for on the international level. In general, as always we do classically, when we finish our study, our analytical documents, this document which we introduced today has also some conclusions and a line of a number of interpretations. So we invite all the parties of the armed conflict in the east of Ukraine to work according to the international humanitarian law and in international standards, especially to refrain from arresting hostages to guarantee that nobody can be tortured and could be treated unhumanly. Amnesty International calls all armed groups and that stand against Ukrainian authorities urgently to liberate all the hostages without any condition and to restrain from torturing or from other cruel treatment until Amnesty International calls Ukrainian authorities to provide urgent liberation of people who were arrested by groups or by some individuals and who do not belong to competent bodies or who don't have an official authority for that. To hold urgent investigation of legal arrests during ATO in the east of Ukraine, to take measures in order to prevent abuse of criminal procedural code as to legal arrest and legal detainment, and to provide to liberate people who are arrested by people who who are not who do not work in police or in official structures, and to hand them over to bodies that have such powers. To set up one register and updated cases of abduction and all those people who are tortured. One more recommendation. We have it before we finish our work on the document, but it's not there because of technical reasons, and that to provide security of all those who became victims of violation of abuse of human rights in the east of Ukraine, and who speak about their cases openly and who send claims to police. The government should provide investigation and to punish those against whom they will collect evidence in abduction, torturing, and other cases of cruel treatment, and to take all necessary measures for such situation never happen. And here I would like to give the floor to Maria Tomak. I would like to underline that this study became possible as a result of our joint work with many other NGOs. And of course, Maria, the floor is yours, and I'm sure that you have last information.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Tetyana. I'm from the Center of Initiative Euromaidan Source. First of all, I would like to say that hostages, this is a new thing for Ukraine, and here there are challenges related to how to correctly document all these things, and we are starting to do it, and of course work with these people, with victims of with those who stayed imprisoned, who stayed hostages. So Ukraine first survived that during the events in Crimea. The first people were disappearing in Crimea. Even now, there are people, minimum 3 activists who disappeared. Ivan Banderets, Vladislav Vashchuk, who disappeared back in March. These are activists of Euromaidan who went to Simferopol, and Vasil Chernysh, the activist of the local Automaidan. We don't know where this person is. Even though hostages is a new topic for Ukraine, but that's not a new topic for post-Soviet countries. If you recollect Russian Chechen experience, and it's worth recollecting it. Russian organizations like Memorial have big experience of work with such organizations. They know how to document that, and thanks to our colleagues from Memorial, we learned that in the east of Ukraine The same system of hostages is implemented and tortures is implemented, similar to what was in Chechnya, especially during the second Chechnya war, especially the personalities, Mr. Girkin and Strelkov. These are people from the second Chechnya war. Memorial has 6 cases where his participation is registered as a person who participated in taking hostages. This experience is very useful for us. We created the joint mission together with Russian Memorial. We together went to Krasny Limant. There is a report at the website of Memorial and our website. And this report negate the words of Pashilin. There was information spread by Russian mass media, and that was repeated by Putin, as if the soldiers of the National Guards were shooting those who were wounded, the members of illegal armed groups in the east. But the fact of shooting by 9 mortars of the hospital in Krasny Liman is still not explained, and we demand that this fact is to be investigated, because the participants of so-called Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republic, the way they behave gives the reason to Ukrainian armed forces to apply the methods which are against the law, even though we do not have the confirmation that they participated in that, but we need to emphasize it. We talked a lot to the victims of tortures and kidnappings in the east of Ukraine, that we can talk about certain classification. First of all, they take hostages the journalists and the activists, the representatives of small and medium system in order to get ransom, then representatives of trade unions. This is done to destabilize the situation in the sector in order to ruin economy. Then the representatives of local government during the elections. These were people who participated in elections, the members of commissions of different levels, the representatives of the candidates. They kidnap their own people, sort of to educate them, the representatives of militia. It's like Robin Hood. They kidnap those who they believe are involved in trafficking drugs. That is sort of disciplinary function. I would like also to remind one of the very known cases. I will enumerate the Ukrainian NGOs after the Zorkala Varot Center for Civil Freedoms, Euromaidan SOS, and so on. We organized an action to support Nadia Savchenko. You probably know about that case. She was kidnapped, imprisoned on the 17th of June. And according to her lawyer in Voronezh, she was transported to the territory of Russian Federation on the 23rd of June. We learned that she is in Voronezh on the 8th of July. But we believe that the reaction to that case is not proper. The US reacted, Lithuania reacted, and no one else reacted to that. We believe that, I would like to emphasize, I'm not talking about Amnesty International, I'm talking about Ukrainian NGOs. We believe this is the case of international kidnapping committed by Russian Federation. The version that they present as if she went to Russian Federation as the refugee is a lie, and we submitted the requirements to the Embassy of France, Germany, and the Representative Office of EU to exercise pressure on Russia Federation to free Nadia Savchenko, and I would like to mention the names of people who were kidnapped in Crimea: Oleg Sentsov, Alexander Kolchenko, Alexei Cherniev, and Gennady Afanasyev. And there are two people from Lviv, Ukrainian citizens, who are in Kursk region in the special place for detention of illegal migrants, and they are there, which even against the ruling of the court. There is a ruling of the court that they have to be deported, but they're still there. No one can provide explanation why they are still there. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they say they called the Russian consul and that he cannot give explanation. The Russian, Svetlana Yanushkina, very famous, says that according to her information, this materials, the case of these guys was taken by FSB, Federal Security Service, and we also request, demand the third round of sanctions, and that is why we went to we addressed the European Union and countries members, and we believe that Russian Federation should be recognized as the country that supports international terrorism. And in the end, I would like to say that now in our house not everything is good, in the sense that we have been demanding to ratify the Roman Charter statute. There is a draft law registered in the parliament signed by 129 MPs that opens up, this draft law opens up the way to ratification of Roman statute, but it's not included into the agenda. We have different information about who's hampering it. We are not interested in that. We're interested in having this draft law approved by the parliament, and first of all, it should be included into the agenda. I also, using this opportunity, would like to address the leadership of the parliament and the parliament as a whole, with the requirement to ratify Roman statute, which will allow to correctly investigate and qualify all these awful things happening in the east of Ukraine with our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. It's interesting that our organization for Amnesty International, we call for ratification of Rome Statute for many years. And the last time we spoke to this parliament in June this year, and then right after they were elected in 2012. Unfortunately, nobody listened to us. They don't hear us now. On a regular basis, we speak about the Euromaidan investigation of all crimes during Euromaidan. We also demand to have a transparent, efficient investigation about the East, and to take the responsibility against whom we will have evidence. And otherwise, this impunity is like a vicious circle. It encourages future abuses, crimes, and that will continue. This is information from us. Now we are ready to answer your questions. Introduce yourself. I see. Here's the hand. Thank you for your report. We know about you. I represent a newspaper. Is the instruments of internal policy and international laws, direct international laws, are clear? Do we have the other instruments inside of Ukraine? How to deal with this issue? Every morning, I have from Shastya town, a woman cannot find her husband. She calls everyone. And can you talk to her today? What can you tell to her today? Thank you very much for your question. It's they can contact us, and because we receive a lot of also calls, contacts through social networks, through letters, through emails, and very often people call us whose relatives disappeared, his families or friends or colleagues disappeared. Unfortunately, what we can do that is quite limited because we are a civic organization and we don't have powers like the government has. What we can do, we can make these cases to be heard, not only in Ukraine but also internationally. And we ask the government to give us explanations. So, for example, as I told you, we have an action of urgent assistance, and our activists speak to Russian authorities with demands. So we create social pressure. What kind of methods can be used? Of course, all legal mechanism and which exist in Ukraine. So to speak to police and to demand for your complaints to be considered for cases, criminal cases to start, because we know that very often people remember, even those who they remember where they were kept, what they did to them. And but this information is lost because it's a normal psychological reaction. People will not remember details in a month. So police should start criminal cases and just to record all data. When it becomes calmer in the east of Ukraine, for us to be able to find, for police to find those who abuse human rights. Thank you. Are you ready to have to set up a site, a common site? What can you offer to the Ministry of Interior or to the Security Service of Ukraine? What can we do together for us to have to solve the problem? Yes, after the press conference, we have a call from Shasta town. You can go with our representative out, and or we can talk to her right after the press conference here. Now we speak about setting up a register, one register to coordinate all the structures, and also for people to send information, because very often victims speak better with representatives of NGOs. So we should take these things correctly. You see, there are brave people who negotiate with militants, with terrorists who capture people, who abduct people, but very often it doesn't end good with them. Mr. Akhmetov, he's not in Ukraine. One such man I know. As to the state, to different people, we suggested to set up a group of negotiators to have negotiations on liberation of hostages. But the state believes that that territory is their monopoly. Maybe not because without reason. Maybe they believe they do it well. But yesterday, an ombudsman informed us that they set up a special negotiating group, which is authorized by the Ministry of Interior and the Security Service of Ukraine to hold such negotiations. We explained delicately that NGOs will not be allowed to this process. It's not an easy topic, and to demand from NGOs to liberate hostages. You understand with whom we have to deal in the east of Ukraine. They are terrorists, I beg your pardon. As a verdict, I don't say it's impossible, I just call you to be realistic. Thank you. Thank you. You told a lot about tortures. What kind of methods terrorists use when they torture people? When they torture Ukrainians, they arrest, they capture or abduct. Among all the cases we documented, we see that those approaches militants use, or separatists, first of all, they are very professional. You can always see that all separatists who use torture, so they have some past which is related to police or with some other law enforcement bodies. Sometimes these cases, these methods are not that visible or obvious, like when they cut fingers. We documented such cases when they cut people with knives. Sometimes they shoot just near the ears. Sometimes they don't allow people to sit all night, and when they sit down, they start beating them. Sometimes these methods of moral pressure, like with Sasha, when he was told, "Well, we would kill you in 3 hours." So there are different techniques, but all of them show that, as a rule, professionals are working on that. We have the last question. Well, very welcome, Ukrainian. Facts of the week. Do you know anything about transportation of Ukrainians who abducted in Donetsk or Luhansk region? More than 3,000 people to Saransk in Russian Federation, and there is a political concentration camp. I received that information that more than 3,162 people are there in Russia, in Saransk region of Russian Federation. We don't have such information. Euromaidan's source doesn't have that information, but if you have it, share that information with us. One more point. In fact, we have information that when this Crimean campaign has started, they started to arrest Ukrainians in Russia, who were just working in Russia. We spoke to one of such victims, and they arrested about 60 people in regions that are closer to Ukraine. It was in Kursk region, and they arrested for hooliganism, and then they were interviewed by FSB. In this case, and in the case of Crimean refugees and East Ukrainian refugees, the questions are the same. Maidan, right sector. So those are the main questions they ask. Or tortures or representatives of FSB. Russian FSB. We have to examine that and check it, and it's great if you give that information to us, because it has to be checked, and also it should be documented, and we should demand. That's why we ask EU to pressure on Russia, because these issues should stop. This should stop. And by the way, during Georgian war in 2008, during the Second Chechnya war, there were massive arrests, massive detainments of people from Chechnya, from that region in Russia, and in Moscow, in central Russia, and we know that they arrested people who looked like they were arrested of people who looked like Georgians. There is no surprise. We have to deal with the same law enforcement body from Russia. Thank you very much. That's it from us. I would like to tell you we have video materials. There are materials here printed, and we'll stay here for some time, and you can approach us. And thank you for coming with this very important issue. Our next speakers will be in 2 minutes.